Hey, this is Joe Hubbard from JoeHubbardBassVideos.com coming at you today with another lesson. And this particular lesson is on the minor major 7th chord review. So with that in mind, grab your bass and let's get started. The first shell pattern that we're going to take a look at is comprised of 2-note ascending chord tones. And we're just going to move successively up and down each chord tone with these 2-note patterns. So it's going to look something like this. We're going to have the root to the flat 3, then shift up, flat 3 to the 5, 5 to the 7, 7 to the root, root to the flat 3, shift, flat 3 to 5, 5 to 7. Now we're going to be descending back down, so I go 5 to flat 3 to the root, root to the 7, 7 to the 5, 5 to the flat 3 to the root, and then root down to the 7, and then that brings us back to the beginning to the root. So what we have when we put that all together is something like this. Now remember, it's over that C minor chord, and it gives that really nice, almost haunting sound that we have. So if we slow that right down, we've got it like this. Okay, get this one together, get it down in all keys, come back, and then we'll take a look at the line study that goes with this shell pattern. What we're going to do in this line study is take the above-below chromatic approach note combination and place it in front of the first note of each one of these 2-note groups. So it's going to go something like this. I've got above and below the root, above and below the flat 3, above and below the 5th, above and below the 7, above and below the root, above and below the flat 3, notice that shift, above and below the 5th. Now I'm going to shift back down and we're going to start the descending group, and I'm going above and below the 5th, above and below the flat 3, above and below the root, above and below the 7, above and below the 5th, above and below the flat 3, and then above and below the root. And then I'm back home. So putting that all together, this is what I've got. Let's slow that right down. Okay, get this one down, get it down in all keys, vary your tempos, and make sure that you're paying close attention to all the fine details of these exercises. Come back and we'll work on the next one. The next pattern that we want to review is the below-above chromatic approach note combination. And we're going to apply it over this same shell pattern that we did in the previous exercise. So there's no need to go over that again. So what we've got here is below and above into the root, below and above into the flat 3, below and above into the 5th, below and above into the 7, below and above into the root, below and above into the flat 3, below and above into the 5th. Now I'm going to descend back down, below and above into the 5th, below and above into the flat 3, below and above into the root, below and above into the 7th, below and above into the 5th, below and above into the flat 3, and then below and above into the root, and then I'm back home. Putting that all together, I've got this. If we slow that right down, this is what I've got. Okay, get it down, go practice, come back, and we'll take a look at the next pattern. The next shell pattern that we're going to take a look at is made up of an odd grouping of notes. So we've got a grouping of 4 and then a grouping of 5. So what I'm going to do is arpeggiate up the chord. I've got the root, flat 3, 5, 7. And then what I'm going to do is go to the flat 3, 5, 7, root, and then flat 3. So here's my group of 4, here's my group of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, then what I'm going to do is do the same thing from the flat 3. So I go flat 3, 5, 7, root, and then I go 5 up to 5. So 5, 7, root, flat 3, 5. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Coming back down, I'm going to start at 7, and I'll play a 4-note group, 7, flat 3, 5, 7, and then go 5 back down to 5, so I go 5, flat 3, root, 7, and then 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'll do the same thing here from the 5th, and I go 5, root, flat 3, 5, and then go down flat 3 down to flat 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So putting the whole thing together, this is what I've got. Let's go ahead and slow that right down. So I've got this. Okay, go practice, get this one together, all keys, all tempos, feel comfortable with it, move it around, really work on holding notes to the full duration, come back, and then we'll add this line study to this shell pattern. Okay, so what we're going to do with this line study is insert the above double below chromatic approach note combination in front of the first note of each one of these ascending groups. So what I have here is this, above double below into the root, and then I'm just going to play that shell pattern. So I've got this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's phrased in 7 and 5. It's a group of 12 notes that we have. Okay, then it goes from here to into the flat 3. Above, double below. Then when I come back down, I'm gonna leave the first 4 notes as they were, and then approach the 5th. And it's that descending 5-note pattern, the first note in the descending 5-note pattern that I'm going to approach. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4. Changes the phrasing because it changes into 3 groups of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then here I do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to end it off by just playing the arpeggio in 2 octaves. So the whole thing is going to sound like this. Slow that down, I've got this. Okay, work on this one. This is challenging to get all those groups of notes happening and feel comfortable with it and play that in time well. So work on it, all keys, all tempos. Come back and we'll work on this next pattern. This next shell pattern is a bit of a unique one because it actually contains a chromatic approach note within the actual shell pattern. So here over the minor major 7, I've got this 7, the root, then chromatic below the 5th. Then I've got the flat 3, the 5, chromatic below the root. Then I've got the 5, 7, chromatic below the flat 3. Then I shift down, root, 3, chromatic below the 7. Then I've got flat 3, 5, chromatic below the root. And then 7, root, chromatic below the 5. Then I shift down to the root, flat 3, chromatic below the 7th, and then 5, 7, chromatic below the flat 3, and then I end up on the actual root. So if I put that all together, this is what I've got. If we slow that right down, we've got this. Okay, get this one down, come back, and then we're going to apply the next chromatic approach note combination over this shell pattern. What we're going to do with this line study is take the double below above chromatic approach note combination and place it in front of the first note of each one of these 4-note groups. So the first one goes into the 7th, second one into the flat 3, the next one into the 5th, then into the root, then into the flat 3, got. Slowing that right down. Okay, get this one together, get it down in all keys, come back and we'll dive into this next study. The next show pattern that we're going to take a look at is based on a chord permutation. So I'm basically going 1, flat 3, 7, 5. So I'm just turning around the 5th and the 7th instead of going the root, flat 3, 5, 7. I'm just going 1, flat 3, 7, 5. And then I'm going to sequence that whole pattern through every chord tone. So this is what I have into from the root, from the flat 3, from the 5th, from the 7th, descend back down from the 5th, from the flat 3, from the root, from the 7th. We put it all together. Sounds like a classical thing. You know, really good finger exercises to practice. These are brilliant, these shell patterns. So really get these under your fingers, get them acclimated into your ears so you can use these ideas rather than just running up and down arpeggios. You know, you've got this chord permutation. So if we slow that right back, okay, you know what to do. Go practice. What we're going to do in this line study is take the below, double above, chromatic approach note combination and place it in front of the first note of each one of these 4-note groups in the ascending version. We're going to do something different for the descending version. So in the ascending version, I've got the below, double above into the root, into the flat 3, into the 5th, into the 7. Okay, when we come back down, we're going to place it in front of the 3rd note in the group. So this would go into the 3rd of the chord in this one. So I've got this. Notice how I'm approaching that flat 3, and that's the 3rd note in that group. And then into the root, into the 7th, and then into the 5th. So if I put it all together, this is what I've got. Slowing that right down, this is what I've got. Okay, get this one down, get it down in all keys, work hard at this. Some of these ideas are a little bit tricky in the very beginning, but remember, this is a review. We're just going back through all of the chromatic approaches and we're applying it all now over this minor major 7th chord type. Okay, come back and we'll do the next one. The next shell pattern that we're going to examine is a retrograde of the previous shell pattern that we had. Remember, we have this. That was that chord permutation. Now we're going to play that completely backwards and we've got this. And then I'm going to sequence that line through the chord tone. So it starts on 5. Next one starts on 7. Next one on the root. Next one on the flat 3. Next one on the root. Next one on the 7th. Next one on the 5. Next one on the flat 3. And then we're back home. So if I put it all together, this is what I've got. Okay, slowing that right down. Okay, get it together. Practice in all keys, come back, and we're going to apply this line study, the chromatic approach note combination, over this line study against this shell pattern. Stay with me. So in this final line study, what we're going to do is take the double above below chromatic approach note combination and stick it in front of the first note of each one of these 4-note groups. So this is what I've got: into the 5th, into the 7th, into the root, into the 3rd, into the root, into the 7th, into the 5th, into the 3rd. Okay, putting that all together, this is what I've got. Slowing that right back, I've got this. Okay, work hard. Make sure that you get this down in every key. Make sure that you're working on the small details of each one of these exercises. Come back and we'll do a debrief. That just about wraps up today's lesson, but before we go, let's take a look at what we've learned. At the end of today's lesson, what we've done is taken all of those 6 chromatic approach note patterns and reviewed it over the minor major 7th chord. We also took a detailed look at the shell patterns. These are important because they're great standalone lines that outline those chord tones over all the different chord types and worthy for constant, consistent review. And then what we did is took the line studies where we took the chromatic approach note patterns and inserted them into those shell patterns, which enables us to develop this great vocabulary for creating our own lines. It's like a line matrix study. Now this is the last lesson in this course. Thanks for hanging with me so long through this. I know it was 18 lessons. We originally said it was going to be 12, but I couldn't get the whole quality of the course into just 12 lessons. We're now going to move on. The next course is going to deal with chord superimpositions. Now stay with me. As always, practice smart, work hard, and play creatively. I'll be checking in with you next week for lesson 1 of chord superimposition. So until then, take care.